another thing catch my eye is the hero's journey you mentioned in your generative change. And I believe it has been your core or main teaching, the hero's journey you have been doing for the past 15 years or more, and a lot of writing.
I wouldn't say it's the main part of the work, but it's a really significant, interesting part of the work. You know, really been working in generative psychotherapy and generative trance, and then the generative coaching work. But the hero's journey has been a great piece, I know, for me, and I think it's been helpful for many people. It's work for those who don't know about it. The hero's journey is something that was developed by the American mythologist Joseph Campbell all the way back in the 1940s. And he described this cross-cultural myth that he was discovering that in every myth there was this story about a person who lived life as this great creative journey. And it wasn't just about money, or it wasn't just about duty and responsibility, but it was about living life in this way that you could enter uncharted territory, that you could find your bliss, as Campbell said, or your passion, and be able to follow that, and not only to have creative transformation for yourself, but very importantly in the hero's journey, that you are looking to make a contribution and looking to bring more wholeness into your community. So I think it's a great idea, it's a great tradition. I think perhaps more than ever in the world, there's a calling for the need for transformational work. Not only individual, but to do things that really can bring our communities back together, that can bring new visions and new ideas. And so the hero's journey is one way to support people in sensing that if they feel that sort of calling, how they can be able to follow it and how they can be able to realize it.
What if people that don't know about their coding? Can they be on the hero's journey if they don't know what they want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I mean, the notion of a hero's journey, Campbell said, you basically have three choices, three life paths that you can follow. Mm-hmm. You can live in the village. You can sort of be inside of the ego ideal. You can just play inside of the rules and the regulations and the standardized reality, if you will. For some people, that's the best thing that they can do. For a lot of people, they don't want to do it. They may be kicked out of it by trauma. They may be excluded from it by their socioeconomic status. They may find themselves so strange in some way that they can't quite fit in. Campbell said that a typical alternative to that is the wasteland, where you sort of reject, you become a dropout, you become cynical, or you're kicked out of the main group. And that would be the sort of the shadow world, and you have things like depression or drugs or cynicism or being in sort of violent groups or something like that. But he said, you know, there is a third path that you could follow, and that is following a path of listening and feeling something deep inside of you is calling you to live your life in some unique way. So you ask, what if people don't find it? Well, the first part of the program is about your relationship to the calling. You know, in Campbell's work, you hear the call, and then you refuse it, and then you answer it if you're on the journey. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people may have been touched by something earlier in their life. They may have felt, wow, when I did that, I had passion, or once I thought, I mean, I was working with one fellow who thought, I just love drawing. You know, I just love drawing, and when I could draw, that I would just open up to this different world. And I grew up in a house where both of my parents were professionals, and they told me over and over and over, that's not realistic. You have to make a good living. Mm-hmm. So I I just suppressed it and sort of went on the fast track. And now all I feel is I'm depressed and anxious. So we're sort of curious about sort of this history. When in your life, or what has ever touched you that you felt this little sort of excitement or curiosity or whatever? Okay? Or sometimes you hear the call by a negative experience, that something inside is telling you, you can't go on like you've been living. It's not enough, or it's not meaningful to me. Or every time I think about going to work, I feel anxious. So sometimes by listening, and this is where some of the work in generative trance and in the generative coaching, by listening to the so-called negative experiences, we can find inside of them that something is trying to wake up inside of you. And when we can listen to that and create the conditions, we find it's not inherently a negative experience, but it's a positive sense of wanting to come out in a certain way. And the negative suffering comes from trying to ignore it.
So what happened after their transformation if they go on the hero's journey?
Well, there's Campbell, described it in like 7 or 8 steps, and we basically say, the first step is the calling, which is sensing not what you think you should do, not what you were told you should do, not what you think will make you rich and famous, but what is the passion in your heart? And that's a simple question, but it's not an easy process to be able to sense it, track it, listen to it, so forth. Once you have a sense of, I want to live this part of me in resonance with this part of me, the question then is how to make a commitment that this is what I'll do. And there's this process where Campbell called crossing the threshold, sort of going through those 2 guardians at the gate. And I think what it represents is that in order to do that, you have to release and you have to let go, and you have to have this sense that there is a bigger consciousness than my ego in the world, and I have to find some way to start to attune to that and listen to that. It's not that your ego is bad, it's that it's not enough. So you have the crossing of the threshold, and he says, usually in the hero's journey, you find some guardian, sort of like a Yoda-like character. I mean, when I was 19, I started this journey, and I met Milton Erickson, who was a Yoda-like character, who's somebody who sort of like gives you the blessing and gives you this sort of disruption of your life, and it gives you a sense of intrigue and sense of possibility. Then, you've got to find other resources and develop all these positive communities that are there to support you on this creative journey.
Yes, and you talk about the demon. You say in the hero's journey there will be many obstacles or
lots and lots and lots and lots every day.
You serious?
It's, in the workshop I sometimes like to joke just to soften the blow, but the bigger the dream, the greater the demons you will attract. And so I think this is obvious. We may try to fantasize that it won't happen or that it shouldn't happen, but it's an integral part of life. And so we see them not only as unavoidable, but we see them as integral parts of the creative development. Without the conflict, without the obstacles, you would not be able to do the transformation and the movement to wholeness. In part because of the creative challenges they bring, but also in significant part because inside of that negativity are precisely the pieces of the wholeness that are needed to be able to make the creative transformation.
that make the hero's journey sounds like challenging, but also exciting for people who can go on, because like you say, there's a lot of guardian in the role, and you talk about specific several steps, and it just made me feel safe. If there's a guardian, there's a resource, there's several steps you just mentioned, then hero's journey sounds fantastic.
Did you say safe?
Yes.
I don't know if safety would be at the top of the list. I think that's one dimension, but I think really when you're living at that level, you realize there's tremendous danger all the time. And again, I don't say it to be paranoid, but just to be, realistic. That at any moment, if you go mindless, if you stop paying attention, that a lot of negative things can happen. And so on the one hand, you have to be open-hearted and relaxed. But on the other hand, I think you have to be really sober and clear.
So you said both have to exist at the same time?
Yeah. I mean, we look at what's happening in the world today. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of injustice. And in many quarters, it seems to be getting worse. So again, I'm not saying that to inspire negativity or fear, but just reality. And a lot of times we think there's no possibility to deal with that open-heartedly and non-violently. So we either turn on the television and go numb, or we become angry and cynical, and we give up. So really what we're looking at is how to have this fierce, open-hearted, creative response to what is existing in the world, and to accept it in terms of something that we either meet and transform and allow us to bring us to the next step of wholeness, or the whole thing can fall apart pretty quickly.
I agree. Yes. It makes it more clear for us to understand what hero's journey is and how we can really approach that or go on with our hero's journey.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing about something like the hero's journey is it really emphasized this is what life is about. It's not unfair, or it's not that it shouldn't be this way. It's like this is the nature of the challenge. And so the notion of responding to the hero's journey is to realize each of us have this call, each of us have this possibility to bring more wholeness, to keep growing human consciousness to the next level. So that's what I think the work is fantastic. And both Robert Dilts and I, we travel in many different cultures, and we find there's such a hunger, there's such an interest in people wanting to make a difference in their communities and in their cultures. And this work, to me, is a really good medium and vehicle to support people in being able to do that.
From what you just say, I feel like there's light open up. It's like you shine on so many paths for so many people's hero's journey.
The light is coming through each of us. We just need to open our beings and let it come through.
Yes. Yeah. Can you tell us how to find more about this?
Our website is IAGC, or you could go to my website, which is stephengilligan.com. We have the IAGC.com website that's coming up, and all an elaboration of this and training programs and so forth. Can all be found on the website.
Sounds fantastic. I'm looking forward to get more information about that.
Great.
Thank you. And